Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and faces of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace. There is only time for war. Now, if you enjoy what I do, then hit me up with a like and a subscribe, a conversational comment if you have the time. I do not retort too much these days, but I do read as many as I can. If I could write you all a sonnet to extol your generosity, I would. But I think we all know what you want me to be doing with my time, and why we are here. For a bit of a story, a bit of lore, and a bit of fun. So today, I wish to continue in my long dormant run concerning the ranks and responsibilities of the Imperium's bulwark, the Adeptus Astartes. So let us begin with a wee yarn to show, not just tell, what it is to be a sergeant in the chapters of the Space Marines. Indomitable. The embassage came as agreed, with all the pomp and panoply of rulership. Ranks of troops in shining armour surrounded the shuttered closed palanquin that slowly approached the bridge. The emperor of this secessionist world was surely inside it, hidden from the view of his lessers. Captain Vez nodded solemnly to Lieutenant Maximilian, who rolled his eyes comically. Verres would have smirked back if he was not in view of the foe. This annoying backwater world had declared independence from the Imperium. As they were so close to the region, Verres decided a swift show of force would dissuade them from their current course. The world was a hub of trade, and the captain had decided to be strategically minded. He did not wish the world to be burned for the transgression of the few. And so, the strike cruiser had appeared in orbit and easily swatted away the pathetic surface-to-void fusillade that came from the rebel world. After bombarding an outlying, relatively unimportant city for a mere 5 minutes, the monarch of this heap had declared he wished to parley. Verres and Maximilian stood on the bridge of fealty, where the leaders of this world had previously pledged undying loyalty to the Primarch Guilliman, all those years ago during the Crusade. An ancient bridge, still pristine after all these years, due to the religious upkeep of the many generations of rulers on this world. All but Emperor Seludar had been loyal, yet Seludar had always been different. When he had taken the throne from his dead father, he ruled with an iron rod, as all had before, but he devoted so much of their surplus production to unusual programs and activity. He militarized the world with claims that the emperor wished it to be so. Why should the people of Antiochus strain the forces of the god emperor with their protection? A decade later, it was decided that the old temples would be left to mature so the program could continue. Eventually, they built barracks, hardware, and simple weaponry. With the aid of rather naive or unwise Mechanicus priests, of course. The ones that Mars had thought had gone a bit native. And then, eventually, when Emperor Seludar was thoroughly convinced of the power of his forces, the message went out to the greater Imperium of independence. Of course, the first message was the loudest, and that was the destruction of the undefended tithe barges when they arrived from the Administratum. And so, the counter-message went out from said Administratum, out on the military frequencies from the astropathic choirs. The Sword Warden strike cruiser was in the vicinity, and the captain thought it a good deed to be done in the name of the Emperor, especially knowing the local militarum generals, who had a firm belief in the use of bombardment to resolve near every issue. The world was important, so optimally, it required to be retaken without being flattened. As the Sword Wardens hailed from that illustrious line of Guilliman, they took the pragmatic view. Verres tapped his gauntleted fingers on his armour in a roll while waiting, and it resounded even above the marching men approaching, on purpose, showing his outward impatience as a display of dominance. Approaching the centre of the short but widely expansive bridge, the soldiers marched to within 20 feet of the Marines, then stopped. The front ranks took 2 steps sidewards, shuffling to permit the palanquin to process further alone. The serfs carrying the box on their shoulders sweated heavily in the scorching sun. Shoulders hunched under the weight, they looked at the ground, never at the Marines. They came to within a mere 10 paces of the Marine leadership. Captain Verres drummed his gauntleted fingers on his armour slower, with more deliberation. Yet Lieutenant Maximilian now frowned as he looked past the palanquin and noted the back ranks of the honour guard begin to shiver, then turn. He looked into the downcast faces of the serfs now stood after placing the palanquin on the bridge surface. They sweated, yet their eyes were wide as they looked at the cobblestone surface. They shuddered in fear. Lieutenant Maximilian had just enough time to put his hand on the arm of the captain to warn him. As they both looked on, the curtains of the palanquin opened to reveal the inside. No monarch or emperor or fop sat there. It was a metallic case, a large one. Both their eyes widened as the thing exploded. Sergeant Vipsanius watched as the bridge became a miniature sun, and both it and everyone standing there were vaporized in the light. The comms burst into activity as the 4 sergeants then snapped options to each other, and within only a minute, the decision was made. In the court of Emperor Saludar, only a few miles away, a dandy turned to the throne and stated, "It is as you stated, most wise one. A request for parley. They wish to discuss surrender." Saludar sniffed and looked down his hawkish nose. "I thought so. So much for the vaunted Space Marines. They are autocrats. Without their masters, they fall to pieces. We shall meet them to accept their capitulation. But now is the time. Inform our ships to come out and engage just before our meeting. Tell them to sink the Marine cruiser while I speak to the delegate they have elected to beg for mercy." A mere hour passed before the pantomime was recreated. This time, the forces that arrived at one end of the now gaping chasm where the bridge once stood were tenfold. Hundreds of ironclad warriors marched in total unity, in their midst a palanquin, but this time the shutters were open. Saludar wished all to see his magnificence, his magnanimity in victory, should they deserve it, of course. On the other side of the chasm was a single warrior, indistinguishable from any line marine, except for flashes of red on his helm. A ranker, an NCO, thought Saludar with a sneer as he approached. His entourage stopped, and a golden set of stairs was brought to the palanquin, and Saludar did not like the sensation of being lowered. He opened the doors and stood there, breaking the backs of his minions as he slowly processed down the golden stairs to stand at the cliff side. The Marine stepped to the very edge and undid his helm, taking it off in one fluid motion and placing it under his left arm. He said nothing. He just glared. Saludar was peeved at it, but he spoke first, practically shouting to get over the 50 feet between the ledges. "I am Emperor Saludar the First. Whom do I address, and why do you request my presence before you, soldier?" He smirked as he looked across at the single Marine. "I am Sergeant Vipsanius, and I come to discuss surrender." Saludar gave a deep sigh and then projected, "Nothing but unconditional will suffice, Marine." "We concur," said the sergeant. "Strike your banners, and I'll call it a day. Obviously, you and your command staff will be executed, but your fighting men will be given clemency if they disarm immediately." Saludar stepped back as if struck. He clenched his fist at his side, and his face reddened in embarrassment and rage. "What is this lunacy?" he screeched. "Your last chance. You see, Emperor. The captain was very popular. You've actually managed to anger the men. I'm not sure I can control them if this continues," stated the sergeant flatly. With spittle frothing at his mouth, Saludar screeched, "You'll regret this impudence!" Vipsanius shook his head and stated, "I now regret giving you the choice." Saludar twisted and raised his fist in the air, punching upwards in rage as he shouted, "Kill him! Kill him now!" Sergeant Vipsanius shouted across, "You have 2 minutes to live." The Emperor capered and screamed, "You have less even than that, Sergeant!" As 2 lines of fire and smoke launched up and now rushed towards Vipsanius. Missiles. The sergeant donned his helm with a snap, then turned and ran. Enraged, the Emperor jumped up and down as he now screamed, "Too late, scum! Running will do you no good!" Yet the Marine then rounded and pounded directly toward the cliff edge and launched himself into the air above the angle of the missiles. All in the court now held their breath as they watched him fly towards them. Saludar took 10 paces back, bumping into the front rank of his guard. Yet all let out an audible sigh of relief as the Marine fell and passed below the cliff edge on their side. It was only 2 seconds later that all began to look at each other in confusion as they heard rumbling and scraping. The bravest of the guard walked towards the edge and immediately trying to run in shock, but his leg was caught by a power-armored gauntlet reaching up from the cliff. The guard was now unceremoniously tossed into the gulf as the Marine now pulled himself over the ledge and drew his power sword. The screaming of the guard was drowned out by the crackle that came from the blade as the Marine flicked a switch in its pommel and blue arced energies sheathed it. 56 seconds left, barked the Marine as he advanced. Saludar squealed and barged into his men, who took up defensive stances. Sergeant Vipsanius then took 4 loping steps and barreled into the front rank of them. The blade moved like lightning, the Marine like a hurricane. Guards in an approximation of power armor were like statues compared. Arms and heads were sent flying. Men shot back into those behind when the sergeant kicked or backhanded any. Screaming filled the air as the back ranks broke and ran. Finally, the last 3 were slain. Vipsanius ducked left, then bounced to the right, beheading the middle guard while slamming his shoulder into the outlier. He then twisted and cleft his sword through the torso of the last, advancing so swiftly that his blade was now at the very throat of Saludar. The Marine's left hand grabbed the Emperor of this hovel and pushed him to his knees. Saludar looked up at the sergeant and spat. "What are you waiting for? Do it!" The sergeant looked down at him and stated, "Alas, I overestimated what you call warriors, but even so, they will not make a liar of me. I said 2 minutes. You have 4 seconds left." Eyes wide, Saludar's mouth moved, but no sound came out. 4 seconds later, Vipsanius struck down, ending the rebellion in one surgical swing. The sergeant. What a terrifying thing to behold, and not just when you are in boot camp. But it is not even just as bad as that when it comes to the Space Marines. The Horus Heresy has them dying in their bucket loads, swept away so fast with combat so brutal, weaponry so fell, and the tabletop and animations oft do the same, for it is hard to see courage without struggle and danger and losses. Yet this, in my mind, has somewhat demeaned the Marine I had grown up with, the one that still exists in my mind. I know sometimes I can be slightly off by the new novels, so do correct me where I might err. Yet it is also because of my enjoyment of what I believed and believe them to be. At least, for me, and anyone else who hears these little songs. So let me tell you where I stand. A Marine is not a man among a formation of 1,000 in heavy armour. Not really. A Marine is not a genetically augmented post-human. A Marine is not a psychologically hardened fanatic. All of these things are true, but they are not the point. They are not the Marine. A Marine is 1 in a billion human souls. A Marine is the unbreakable will of humanity. A Marine is the greatest warrior our race has ever known. That is a Marine. 1. A chapter is not an army of 1,000 soldiers. It is a movement of 1,000 heroes, 1,000 paragons acting as one. 1,000 Lancelots, Hannibals, Achilles, Alexanders, Ashokas, Caesars, Richard the Lionhearts, Alaric's, Cucullins, Miyamoto Musashi, Andy Murphys, Shakas, Mariuses, and Napoleons. They are unbreakable, the kind of men that stand before the storm and watch it wither before their gaze. Each Marine is a war leader able to guide the passage of millions across a battlescape. Each is able to shoot faster than Billy the Kid, more accurate than Seymour Haya. They can run, march, charge, or fight all day and night. They never stop, never surrender, no matter the odds. But these things are not truly because of the augmentations. Those are for bringing them onto a par with the Xenos filth. No, the Marine is a man, and that is why he is so feared. A Marine is one of the best humans that have ever lived. Only the will of the princeps of the Adeptus Titanicus is on a par with these men of steel. Only the sister of the Sororitas and the Scions come close to their discipline and order in battle. Yet, even then, the Marine is more. For their Astartes resist the enemies of the Immaterium. They stare into the void and spit in evil's eye. And they are exceptional to merely gain access to aspire to be a Marine. They must defeat or slay scores of other worthies, the very pinnacle of human ability. And even then, they may fail. Hence, the Marine is a soul that shines brightly, but has been folded and forged 1,000 times. He has proved himself before ever he dons the power armor and takes up holy Balder. A Marine need never fear falling into the hands of the enemy. Few there are, even in the grim darkness of the far future, who can destroy the will of a Marine without expending decades of effort and ingenuity. And amongst these leaders of men, these bands of heroes, there stand those who are first amongst equals. No Marine can buy or wangle his position, ever. Grit, determination, dedication, valor, honor, wit, wisdom, and skill. This is what it takes. A Marine can only rise through the ranks through experience and excellence, and it is right to be so. All ranks amongst any army are fundamentally important, or they would not exist. From your lance jack to your brigadier, every level is necessary for the whole to operate. Yet in the chapters of the Legio Astartes, the Space Marines, things are somewhat streamlined. For there is not much need for command when one leads men all driven to the same degree, men all moving in the same direction to the same goal. Yet, even amongst these paragons, there are the youthful, the brash, the inexperienced. And amongst these twisted mirrors of exaggerated men, the need for dominance exists. Hence, when one considers a sergeant of the Space Marines, what kind of a man is that? What kind of a warrior? What kind of a leader? They are the best of the best. It sounds corny, prosaic, or lazy, but it is still true. There are few senior officers amongst the Marines for 2 reasons. The first is a unified purpose from such skilled and talented individuals. The second is the caliber of their sergeants. A sergeant of a squad of Space Marines is a lion amongst tigers. He is the silverback. All follow him, not because of rank or title, but because of experience and sheer respect. and perhaps a tiny smidge of that which the Marines are supposedly not able to feel: fear. For a sergeant of the Space Marines is a veteran of 1,000 battles, often over many hundreds of years. They have seen every form of combat, every type or duration of campaign, endured every setback, beaten every adversary extant in the entire galaxy. They will be the paterfamilias, the primi pillars, and brother to their squad members. Yet also, they are just another Marine, another warrior. The sergeant is the future of every Astartes that dons the warplate, should they last long enough. For any who do not excel will die, and any who do not learn will die. But any who go the distance, they will wish to pass on their knowledge, and it is here, amidst the fires of battle, that the sergeant teaches his brothers most, by his example, by what he does. Anything conceptual will already have been downloaded into the Marine's mind through psycho-indoctrination. It is in the din of battle where the training continues ever onwards, because of the sergeants. And the Marines are almost immune to the usual tactics of many an enemy, for the decapitation strike may work on the foe. It may work on the Astra Militarum, the Guard. It may work on the Navy, the Mechanicus, or even the Orc. But it does not work on the Marines. Not one bit. For the sergeants will simply step up and coordinate seamlessly. So if you manage to kill the captain and those lieutenants under him, the sergeants will simply step up and coordinate seamlessly. They will elect a field leader, if one is not abundantly obvious via experience or expertise, and that is if they require one at all. For a campaign, of course, but they do not get bogged down in a battle. They simply do what they do. They wage war. And it is the sergeants that are the crop from which lieutenants, then captains, then chapter master are taken. Of course, there is the other option, that these skilled individuals can go to the first company veterans, but all who do not turn into sergeants. And each one of the lieutenants and captains, and even the chapter master, have been a sergeant before. They know what they are asking of their subordinates with every feign, foray, or full-on furball. The sergeants will make it happen, as long as they are let in on the plan from the onset. And a sergeant also has the distinguishing feature of being honoured with a vast array of war gear options. Some might favour a power sword, combi weapon, or lightning claws. Others a plasma pistol and a power fist. For a sergeant of a Space Marine chapter has used every weapon in the Astartes arsenal and can wield each with equal lethality. It is merely a point of preference. It is the sergeant who stands toe-to-toe with the Demon Lord, the Xenos hero, or his Chaos counterpart. For they are leader, they are the great wolf, and they will protect their pack, their tribe. Some may be promoted within a section, inheriting a squad sometimes. Some will be elevated after a set period and signs of honour, given the choice of what role to fill. Some are so adept at their trade, so suited their speciality, that it is a waste to use them anywhere but those specialities. Some, of course, will become the most dreaded of all their kind, the drill sergeants who lead the scout marines. But let us not talk of such dire things, for like all their ilk, they are truly horrific in their action, no matter the positive intent and result. These pathways and practices will be guided again by two things, the Codex Astartes and their individual chapters' rites and cultures. But it does not vary a great deal from the norm, as far as I am aware at the very least. The sergeant of the Space Marine squad is a thing of terror and wonder. They can break the enemy's heroes, smash them in front of their enemy, and make them break. Or their mere presence can reinstate a broken line, can rally a squad with ease. The sergeant, the very backbone of the entire army, the entire chapter, the entire brotherhood of Space Marines. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed my thoughts on the Sergeant of the Space Marines. If you enjoyed this video, then please do like and subscribe. Thank you so much for your precious time. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.